So, to start with the first kind of open-ended question, using the language from Finke and joining Jesus, how has God been messing with you in the past several months in the midst of this COVID situation, the lockdown, all of that? How's He trying to get your attention? Give a little snapshot of that.
For me, he eased me into this one. I first started with retirement on October 1st, and that gave me more isolation, more time to redirect my life. Then I had a broken knee and knee surgery that put me into an even quieter time of life where I was continuing to be isolated. And then came COVID. And I think that for me, looking at what has taken place in the last 10 months for me, I needed to taste what it felt like to be isolated.
Mm.
And I think if anything, God is really nudging me to seek the people who are out there that are hurting right now and feeling isolated, because I can relate. I have a sensitivity to it because I just shared that experience. And I just think that there are people out there I need to seek out and be a good ear to listen and step alongside, because there's certain people right now. Isolation is not something that comes natural for us. Even though some people feel the need to do that, we know that that's more the devil coming out of than the Lord. So I think that's the one thing that really stands out to me, that God is really nudging me. I'm a slow learner, so he had to give me 10 months of education, but that's kind of how that's what I think is going on in my world right now.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's a real contrast there from Lyn being in the working world and being with people all the time and being highly sociable, which I know you to be that type of person, to then God kind of saying, I'm going to train your heart in a different way. Has that been more jarring, or has it been a good journey?
Both, honestly, both. I welcomed retirement. The surgery and the long recovery was jarring. I all along kind of saw God's hand in it, and kind of felt like, okay, I'm being pruned and this is okay, and it's gonna hurt, but it's for a good purpose. And so I don't think, I wouldn't say it was easy, but I certainly think that it was worthy of my time.
Yeah. Well, I'm so thankful that you can look back on that circumstance and see God's hand in it and how He's been molding and shaping you along the way.
Yeah.
That's encouraging. So move to my second question, which is a little bit more structured, and I've asked the congregation to kind of do this, and I think some people have done it privately. I'm asking you to do it publicly, so thanks for being willing to put yourself out there a little bit. But I think we're all learning different things in our own corners of the kingdom, and so I'm just wondering if you could give me 2 or 3 things that you've learned in these past several months, having been isolated, watching the things that are going on in the world, and still knowing that God is at work in the midst of it all. What are a couple of those things?
I think one of the first things that really stood out to me is, as a lifelong Christian, I've always known we are the church, but until we were removed from the building, I don't think I ever truly understood it.
Hmm.
I think that was a realization, an aha moment for me. It was a loss, quite a big loss for me not to have that building. But I realized that building was the place I gathered with my church family. It was a relationship place, right? But my relationship with the Lord wasn't necessarily restricted to that building. And it wasn't until you started the services and started including us, which you took me out of my comfort zone and was a little intimidating at first. It was so beneficial. It gave us time to practice being the church.
Hmm. Well, and again, I'll
And
say right back at you. Thanks for being willing to do something that was maybe a little scary. I can't say that I wasn't a little bit nervous about how that might turn out from my standpoint, but maybe further evidence that sometimes we just have to follow Jesus out of the boat when he says, "Come follow me," and walk on water a little bit and realize that he's going to work in the midst of that. And it takes some practice too. It takes some practice and some time to train a heart. So I've been on that journey as well.
well, you're better at it than we are, that's for sure. But I've enjoyed the journey. I thank you for taking us out there out of the boat with you. But it was, it really was good to be back. But it was different, not just because we didn't sing and do other things, but because I think my mindset was different. I realized that it's up to us to be the church, and this is a really good opportunity time in this world for us.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I think I heard you say something the other day about church right now being kind of sterile. Sterile. I'm not trying, and I can't disagree with that statement because it seems like so much of what brings out the vibrancy and the feelings of togetherness has been stripped away from what we can do in person. And I think that's a further shaping of what it means to be the church. To be honest, am I mourning the fact that we can't sing and shake hands and hug and do those very personal things? From my pastor's heart is saying, I want to be hugging everybody I can find because that's how I show love. I want to be asking everybody, let's sit down and have a long conversation about what God's doing in your life and how can I walk with you. But to not be able to do that, that's as tough for me as the next person, and to have to make the decisions and be amongst those who has to say, this is what we're left with right now. That's tough. So I'm with you on that.
But at the same time, having the ability to stay home and still see church, I mean, this forced us to bring that about in a much shorter, probably, window of time than we would have planned on.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, for those that can't get to church, or those are times when I've been out of town, I knew I could still enjoy church. And so it's kind of both worlds, it's got its advantages and disadvantages, but is it just being different? Nobody likes different.
Thanks for pointing that out. Change is a kind of a four-letter word for humans in general, but churches and maybe Lutheran specifically. And so to kind of navigate that is not always easy. And it's made some people upset, which is kind of par for the course. But to know that God's working on shaping our hearts, and sometimes that hurts a little bit, but that he's got a plan for that is a really good thing. So what's something else that you've learned in the midst of this?
To trust God. Again, something I've always known, something I thought I put into practice, but this world right now, and the bullets that are flying, somewhat literally and somewhat otherwise, it's just never in my lifetime been a time when I've had to challenge that trust so desperately. And I do think that, again, it's a good thing. I think that I think I'm so lucky to have trust, to have hope, because it's hard right now. It's hard for everybody, even those of us that have trust and hope in God.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, where we can share that, I think that this is an opportunity.
Right. Yeah. I second what you're saying. And I wonder sometimes if there's that we get used to using words too much in a certain context, that it's like, we are people of faith. But when you say, well, let's change the word just a little bit, and the nuance maybe changes a little bit, we are people of trust. Because faith and trust, I mean, those are pretty close synonyms. What does it look like to be people who trust And where do we put our faith? Where do we put our trust? Is it in our economy? Is it in our country? Is it in any of our politicians? I don't want to get political here, but no, don't poke that bear. But do we trust God above all things? And that's a long obedience in the same direction, to use one of my favorite quotes.
Yeah. So that was my second one.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure there's a whole hour-long conversation in that one, so maybe we won't delve too deeply into that. How about the third one? What was the third thing you've learned?
Well, you touched on it just a few minutes ago. I've never read Gary Chapman's 5 Love Languages, but I'm pretty sure that the human touch is mine. I'm a hugger. I'm a toucher. I mean, it's been, like you said, you just want to hold people.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you want to be held. And that is a therapy all of its own, living without them.
Right, right.
So I've taken it for granted all my life, and I'll never take it for granted.
We can agree upon that, because I go back and forth between physical touch and spending time with people. Those are the two that usually rank highest when I've taken that quiz before. And to cut out physical touch, there's the whole bit of science that you have to have a certain amount of physical touches from somebody else to maintain our mental health. I think that there's been a lot of study on that, and I can only imagine what this has done for those of us, especially who angle more deeply towards being more tactile lovers.
Yeah. Yeah. And who knows how long it'll be. I guess it's going to be as long as it's meant to be, but it is something we have to. And touching elbows, it just doesn't cut it for me.
I'm sorry. Yeah, right. It's like saying a poor man's something. It's a poor man's hug. It doesn't really hit the spot, so to speak.
No. So I think that just enjoying the relationships I have really has been something I've learned to put at the forefront and not take for granted.
Sure. So I guess maybe the follow-up question is, how has that taught you to kind of lean into some of the other areas that wouldn't be your normal language?
I think I listen more intently. I hang on words probably more intently when having a conversation with a good friend or a loved one, because there's still body language, even if it can't be, touching, and there's still ways of showing terms of endearment, and making sure that those are a part of an everyday conversation, not just saying I love you as just a blah blah blah, but really meaning it.
Right. Yeah. I hear you. Yeah. I'm with you on that. I think there's plenty of ways that we've had to learn to be a little bit more adaptable, a little bit more flexible with the way that we do things. And has it taught us some transferable skills that I hope we stick with going forward. So maybe that's the final question, and to finish up the conversation, if there's something you can take from this journey through these past several months, and even whenever that journey is kind of complete, where I think you're right in saying we're all not quite sure when that's going to be coming to an end, but what if there's something that you can take with you that you've learned that may be transferable into getting back to normal? What would it be?
Talk more, text less, make more phone calls to stay connected, send cards, buy postage. The little touches in this world that we've tried to eradicate from our world, they still matter.
Right, right. I hear what you're saying, and I second that. How easy it is to send a quick text message, and there's some value to that. I won't discount that, and but at the same time, I find myself guilty of that from time to time. That uh, instead of letting it being a sound bite, letting it be a um, more extensive conversation. Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks again so much for letting me push you a little bit and push you out of your comfort zone and being willing to have this conversation, because I think your insights are right on. And thanks for being willing to learn with me and teach me some things as well.
Thank you